My name is Wendi Witecki, and this is another edition of Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendi. And today's guest is Cindy. Say your last name for me, Cindy.
Dooch.
Dooch from the PEAL Center. And the PEAL Center is the center that runs the whole entire state of Pennsylvania, except for our little Erie County that we run. They are the big sister to us, and we are so appreciative of Cindy being here today to talk about some stuff going on in the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Wendi. Good to be here.
So glad to have you. So let's get right into it. What's the nitty-gritty? What's going on? What do we need to know?
Well, we're getting a lot of calls from families. So I wanted to, talk about the big topics that we're talking about, or the topics that are really, affecting a lot of people. To start then, you guys are probably experiencing the same. We're getting a lot of calls about evaluations. This all hit so quickly and so fast that there are some evaluations that were just wrapping up, some evaluations that were midway, and some where we had, they were just starting. So, families are kind of in a quandary now. Where does that leave us? So regarding evaluations, if the evaluation was almost done, there's no reason not to have meetings. There's no reason not to carry on with trying to develop an IEP. Now the IEP, you want to keep in mind, the IEP you're wanting to develop is going to be for the school year, for when the buildings are open. We're not developing an IEP for this, the situation that we're in now.
Distance
of course,
learning.
Yeah, there's uncertainty, but what we're planning for is, as we move ahead, what's the child going to need in, if it is a brick and mortar building, what they're going to need in a brick and mortar building. So no reason all those things can't be done. If the team was kind of midway in developing or in coming up with the evaluation, we're going to want to do as much as we can. There are some things that can be done to get as much as we can regarding the evaluation. Some assessments, some testing, or some assessments. I think of the one that they usually do for behavior, BASC. That's just a matter of a parent, a teacher, possibly a student filling out a form. So something like that can be done through the mail, or I don't know if they have a virtual option. But something like observations or some IQ test, as far as the IQ test, it's standardized. So they have to do it typically in standard conditions. This is not a standard condition. So we're not looking at those things being able to be done right now. Districts, we find that they're doing a variety of things when this happens. Sometimes they're just, if parents in agreement that we're just going to delay this process till the buildings open back up and we can do observations and do assessments, despite the fact that that in itself isn't compliance, there's a lot of understanding and flexibility that has to be done now. So a district isn't necessarily going to get in trouble for if there's documentation of an agreement that they had with the school, with the parent, to say, we're just going to delay this until everything opens up again. That's fine. It's probably not a good idea to just close out the evaluation as things are now and say the child's not eligible, because that could get the district in trouble, especially under child fine, to say that they've done this minimum testing and that they're going to quit the evaluation now and find the child ineligible. That could get them in some trouble. So that wouldn't be a good idea. So I would look for flexibility on both the part of the parent and the part of the school in saying, we're going to put this in place now. And whether they close it or decide, to continue it until the buildings open up, kind of lets us know then what's next as far as developing an IEP. So, you know, always have that open communication. At this point in time, you know, as important as communication was before, it's even more important now. So as far as, you know, the parents that we talk to, we try and encourage, keep in contact with your schools, let them know what's going on. And, you know, we'll try and get those things done regarding the evaluations.
Is there anything regarding what teachers can do right now if they are not getting any response from families? I know I deal with a lot of teachers, and in the city there is a high number of parents that aren't responding to the teachers. They aren't responding to the letters. They're not responding to the phone calls. What are the steps there? Do you have any idea?
Well, we have talked with PDE about this, and you know, what we find, some things that are going on is the school does have to stay in contact with those families. They're encouraged to stay in contact with the families, and for the school district to document what they're trying to do to be in touch with those families. Now, unfortunately, some of what we have heard is that sometimes when the district isn't hearing from the families, they're reporting families to CYS. And this just is another level of frustration and overwhelming for the family. At the same time, we have heard of lots of domestic situations going on now. This level of frustration affects different people differently. So some of those might be founded concerns that the schools have, being mandated reporters to report those things to CYF. So, you know, it's kind of a tough call, but that's one that the districts are, you know, that's up to them to make those decisions. But the best that they can do right now is document all of those attempts to get in touch with a family and the different ways they try and get in touch with the family. You know, we've found out now more than ever, not all families have access to technology, not all families have access to the internet, and this has been a great difficulty just for the whole situation.
Yeah, because it's kind of, then it starts to tax that system with all those well checks. Mm-hmm. So it starts to flow. But if you're not answering the school district at this point in time, then I think that would probably put you at risk anyhow, and you probably should have a well check. But the whole thing is just a revolving circle.
Yeah, it is. So what we're also, you know, there's also questions then about attendance, truancy, what districts are, and what we hear a lot from PDE when we ask these questions is that the districts all have local control. So in some situations, you know, the district or the Department of Ed can offer guidance, but the district's going to do basically what the district wants to do. But regarding attendance and you know, how late the school was open or how late into the school year that the instruction was being provided, that the only thing that's going to have to be reported to the state, and that's reported then to the feds, is, you know, how did you keep these things? How did you find attendance? How did you do this? There's not going to be attendance necessarily that's going to be reported to the PA Department of Ed or to the feds. The only information that's have to be reported is how did you do those things from the school districts.
So is that where I'm getting the confusion through districts? Like this one only takes a summary of 3 things at the end of every 2 weeks. This school is online classrooms every single day, going to classes, and then the next school district over has a hybrid of it. Is that why we're seeing all that?
That's all that local control. Yeah. They're
But at the
dealing
end
with
of
it
the,
their own ways.
but at the end of the day, one's not any better than the other.
No, it's, again, it's that local control, what they want to collect. But, moving or, thinking about the information they have to provide to the state and then the state to the feds doesn't include that specific, this kid came this many days, this kid came this many days.
I see. Interesting how they're trying to do that. What about seniors and their days? Have they talked much about what they're doing with seniors specifically?
And interesting you asked that. We just had a call with the Pennsylvania Department of Ed this afternoon, and that was one thing that they're trying to get guidance put out on, is the seniors. Kids who have IEPs, they can go beyond their 12th year. So especially with kids who are working on transition, there is that opportunity to go beyond this 12th year, don't accept your diploma, and have the team get together, the IEP team get together and talk about what can happen when the buildings open again, when stores are opening again, when businesses are opening again, and what opportunities are available to the student at that time. That leaves then students who have aged out, who are 21, and who, with the coming school year wouldn't be eligible for services anymore. So what we're looking at there is, on a case-by-case basis, the IEP team coming together, and any opportunities or any, any of these last-minute things that the child might have not been able to receive because of the situation we're in. Get together with your team, again, talking about communication, keep that communication open, and see if the school will agree to provide some services beyond age 21. And like I said, there's a lot of, all the way from the feds down, we're talking, U.S. Department of Ed, we're talking about creativity and flexibility and expecting that on a lot of our parts. So start with the school, have that communication, ask the question, concerns about, a child aging out and the parent not feeling like they're ready. And hopefully a team can come to an agreement then on what can be provided to the student.
Once again, one of those hard pickle places to be at. I mean, just
yep.
so let's talk about well, that's kind of like the continuity
of education plan.
Like, oh my God, tongue tied. This epidemic, it's hitting me, pandemic.
Well, and this would be important for families to know, is about this continuity of education plan. So every district by April 17th was supposed to submit to the state their continuity of education plan. What are you going to do to ensure that kids are continuing to get their education? Initially there was some confusion because even at the federal level, U.S. Department of Ed came out saying, you can offer this or you can offer this, but make sure that you're providing education for kids with disabilities. And when that information came out, schools said, well, we just won't provide anything. And then we don't have to, we don't have to make sure we're providing for kids with disabilities and won't get in trouble for what we're doing because we're not educating anyone. But of course, then, U.S. Department of Ed came back and said, no, that's not what we meant. You do have to provide education. So the way it was kind of broken down in PA was that we had this instructional planning, which is, a real plan for learning. What are kids going to learn from a certified teacher, and what new material are they going to get, and how is that going to be delivered to them? This is all in the continuity of education plan, which many districts have put on their website. It's a public document. Anybody should have access to it. By now, they've all been submitted. I can't say that all 500 school districts have submitted theirs, that I don't know. They were to have submitted it by April 17th. So this gives a breakdown of the district's plan for how they're going to educate kids while we're in this situation. And I would suggest, or it would be a good idea for families to read over this. Is the school doing what they said they were going to do? And that might help you in your IEP meeting to say, well, you said you're going to do this. What about this? Might help you give the parents some ideas on what to do. Now, we talked about instructional planning. The other part of that education that could be provided is enrichment and review. This is information that kids have already learned, and this is just reinforcing materials that kids could do, but it's not new learning. So that a parent can do with the child at home. You know, new instruction has to come from a certified teacher, so that instructional planning is what we're looking to come from you know, a certified teacher. So take a look at those. They're interesting. They'll give you a lot of insight. You can usually find it on the school district's website.
Have you heard any more of, for Pennsylvania specifically, what they're starting to talk about for potentially next year at all? I've heard some really interesting things coming out of Ohio, like first grade only going on Mondays and Tuesdays, and second and third on Wednesdays. And like, I'm starting to hear all kinds of fun stuff. Have they even approached the subject yet that you know of?
No, in fact, you know, like I said, we were just in touch with Carol Clancy from the Bureau of Special Education just this afternoon, and they are thinking ahead. They're thinking ahead about, you know, what extended school year is going to look like for 2021. They're thinking about, you know, what is going to happen when the buildings open again. But right now, there's no, you know, with such uncertainty, there is no plan in place for, or even, you know, this is still something that's being worked on. No plan in place for, you know, what happens come end of August, beginning of September. They are talking about, you know, some guidance for schools in helping to determine what kids with IEPs might need when they go back. So, you know, we've often heard it referred to as compensatory education, kind of make-up education. But that word kind of has a connotation of the school didn't provide something. And in this case, it's not that the school didn't provide it because they didn't provide it. It's because of, you know, what we've been forced into here and what we have to do that they haven't been able to provide it. It's not through a fault of their own. So, you know, in this, you know, if you want to call it catch up, or, you know, this education that kids are going to need when they go back to make them, you know, put them in a place where they were as if this didn't happen, that's going to take a while. And there will be guidance coming from the Department of Ed, but that's something that's in the talks right now.
Yeah, because I was curious to see, because there's a difference between instructional planning and enrichment. And so let's talk about the difference, because I know the difference. Miss Liz down there knows the difference. But at some point, we've got to get out of this enrichment, which is kind of what we're all doing. We're not really learning like lots of new stuff, I don't think, district to district. I think it still has to be a lot of review for the most part. But what's the difference? And, you know, it's kind of weighing on my mind is how do we move forward next year with that? So yeah. What's the difference?
Well, instructional planning, you're looking at something that the child has not learned yet. You're looking at initial teaching of a concept. So that initial instruction has to come from a certified teacher. So then you're probably looking at, you know, you might have heard of that asynchronous learning and synchronous learning. Synchronous, you know, it's when it's happening in real time, one-on-one. A teacher might have, you know, a Google Classroom where she's instructing a number of students. And, you know, if that's happening, that's more that instructional planning. It's the information is coming directly from a certified teacher. In asynchronous learning, we're looking at a teacher maybe videoing herself, doing a lesson or going over a PowerPoint, and then the student having access to that at a later time. So that's instructional planning. Enrichment are these activities where the learning has already occurred. So they're more like review or almost like homework. So it's, you know, things that the students already learned. This is just reinforcing or, you know, reviewing things that a teacher has already instructed the child in.
Okay, so another question I have about that in a way is, I know there's certain states, some neighboring states, that have ended their school year. They've called it quits. What is PA's thought on that, and where are we on that? Because interestingly enough, Friday, I think I only have 2 school weeks left in my district, but we're picking up Chromebooks on Friday for there being 2 weeks left for the middle school kids. And that's really weird to me. So really weird. But what is PA looking at? Are we going the whole route? You know, what is the cutoff date? What are they thinking? Because there are so many states that said, you know what, we're opening back up, parents are back to work, they've got enough on their plate to be at home, you know, to work 8 hours and come home and homeschool and do all this. So what are they thinking? I'm like, why are we not on that? Not that I want to be on that, but what are the thoughts there behind that for the state of PA? I'm curious.
Well, you know, the governor signed Act 13, which tells the schools that they have waived the mandatory 180 days. So, and there's no guidance beyond that. So, you know, no,
Nice.
just, you don't have to do 180. So that's where our guidance kind of ends. But they were also told, you know, you don't have to don't change your school calendar. So, you know, if you kind of, I can't interpret any of that, but my own interpretation for myself would be you'd leave the end date as whatever it was on the school calendar. Some schools we've, you know, found through talking to families are ending earlier. And there's not going to be any repercussions or anything because Act 13 does say that the 180 is waived. We're going to have to make up for that time at some point. But I think what also has to be considered is, you know, the governor released the red, yellow, green plan for opening the state again. And schools are not until green. And that being said, even when schools are in green, there's still precautions that have to happen. So on a call we had this afternoon regarding extended school year, even those northeastern counties that are in the yellow zone now, they still have protocols that they have to go by regarding the governor's plan and can't necessarily have, you know, a full ESY program open. So that's something to consider too.
Yeah, that's us. So we are yellow in Erie County, and it's, you know, extended school year. What are we doing? What are we thinking? Because, you know, people are worried about when and how do we open? Do we realistically think that that's going to be a September issue? Or, you know, nobody knows. Nobody knows. So, you know, is there football? Who knows? Y'all are touching each other in football. So it's just a really tricky spot to be in. The other really tricky spot I think to be in right now is our juniors and seniors, or those 14 and older that are transitioning and that we have to work on transitioning. And how on earth is the guidance? What's the guidance there with that, with OVR and transitioning? Do you know at all?
So regarding transition, I mean, we're still looking at, you know, at the IEP team deciding how are these things going to happen. The things that are in the IEP on that day when, you know, schools were closed, how can that be delivered? Well, some things like, you know, community-based work experience, they can't necessarily happen. But in talking with OVR, the Office of Vocational Rehab, and the pre-employment services that they do run for families or for the students, some things can happen, some things can't. Surprisingly, OVR is saying we can do job coaching virtually. I've asked the question, how does that happen? And haven't gotten, you know, a clear answer on how that happens, but OVR says they're open for business, and they're providing anything that they can provide regarding pre-employment services. So, you know, if we talk about services up to age 26, you know, there are some services they can provide. All counselors are still working. All directors are still working. They're still there to answer questions and to be able to provide services. What those services look like might not be what we're used to. And, you know, for kids that are still in school and, you know, there was transition that was part of their IEP, like anything else that's on the IEP, we have to talk with the school about how can that best be provided now, or can it even be provided now? And again, looking for that flexibility and creativity once the building's open again, to how are they going to get those services?
Yes, I know. I also provide pet services in a couple of districts, and we decided with each district, well, the districts decided that we're just going to hold, because it was an impossible task to try to get a guest speaker, so to say, in the middle of trying to manage a regular normal school day if people were on Zoom all day. So what a complicated job, because I believe they're still starting to release kids into the transitioning services. It's just a matter of, okay, well, now what? So we'll just keep referring them back to OVR, I guess, for now.
Yeah, that was the, you know, instruction that we got from OVR, that, you know, if they have questions or if they need some services. I mean, you know, for kids who are still in school, they can get their pets services. If they were to need services outside of the pre-employment, the waiting list is still in place. OVR did they're working on closing, I think it was 4,500 cases throughout May to try and, you know, reduce that waiting list. But it's open, they're functioning, but it's kind of at a limited capacity.
Kind of like us. I know that it's been interesting trying to do intakes and get things done. People aren't as willing to do it over Zoom as they are to come in the office and meet with you face to face. So it's a challenge. The information is a challenge. What would you say for the PEAL Center is your number one area of concern that most of your phone calls are coming around right now?
Well, there are, you know, a lot of it. I mean, we're talking about, I mean, we've been in this for what, five or so weeks now. So initially it was a lot of that, you know, my child's not going to learn this way. My child has difficulty learning this way. So it was the actual plan for learning going to happen. And at this point, I mean, I'm not suggesting that anybody pull out of education, but, you know, if you find this isn't working for your family, don't kill yourself. The guidance, again, that we get from PDE is the first concern for every family and for them is the health and safety of everyone. So, you know, compliance is last on the list right now. And the concern is health and safety first. So after that, then we'll think about how important is education in the midst of everything that we're doing now. We're all pretty much doing our best. So, you look to, to the other party then to say, we're expecting you to do your best too. So it's tough. You're still muted.
The chat box was opened up in front of me. I pushed the wrong button. This technology. How does that lead into dispute resolution? Are they working on that right now? Is that on hold too?
No, that's really interesting because dispute resolution, it's the only thing that changed is that they're doing it virtually, which in a lot of cases, regarding mediation and due process, they've been they were on the forefront of this. Due process has been using virtual, virtual technology for probably about 2 years now. And now you would think this was like one of the last places you'd look for having a meeting virtually, but because of the proximity of some of the hearing officers and expert witnesses you're wanting to bring in, for some teams it works. Due process, the hearing officers, they could come from across the state. So, if this saves people a lot of time, if it works for the team, then it's okay. A parent shouldn't feel that that they need to do it virtually if they don't feel comfortable with that. There is a lot to be said for in-person due process, and most of that revolves around body language, things like that. But that said, anything from facilitation of IEP meetings, mediations, resolution sessions, they're all being held virtually. It is easier to do, or there is the accessibility of being able to do a complaint online now too. It used to be that they had to have an actual signature to be able to submit their complaint and have it go through. Now it can all be done online. You can use an electronic signature. The complaint process is alive and well.
I did not know that, so that's new to me. How very interesting that they are leading in that area. So how fun. Can we think of anything else? Mary Ann or Elizabeth, do you have any questions for the PEAL Center whatsoever about an individual topic? Mary Ann, you're muted. Mary Ann, press your space bar, Mary Ann.
I got it. I just had to get down there. No, actually, I was listening to hear. I understand everything that you were explaining, and I wanted to see if there was anything updated, any updated information. I know one of their concerns, in addition to extended school year, has been, are they going to get compensatory education when they get back? I keep keep explaining, well, we're going to have to meet with the IEP team. Now, some IEP teams have already met, and yes, it was for if the school was back in session. And the parents are doing the best they can, but their concern is, my child's regressing. I can't do all this. I can't teach him what he needs to know. I can't, and so what's going to happen next? Then I've had a couple other parents, this is interesting. My child is doing better now at home than when she was in school. I'm like, okay. So when they get back, I think they're looking for an assessment to see exactly what the difference is. But that's rare. That's, for the most part, that the concern is that the child is regressing, But you know what? My son is in adult services and he is regressing. His muscles are regressing. He hasn't had his physical therapy or occupation therapy now for 2 months. And as much as I explain to staff to do stretching activities because he has severe cerebral palsy, I don't know if it's getting done. We won't know until we get some assessments when this is all over. But you're right, the health and safety has to come first. And I thank God every day he survived COVID-19.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he did have it. And no matter all the precautions that the group home had, I mean, I haven't seen him since March 8th. And he went into the hospital April 11th. And thanks to a couple nurses, we Zoomed. But he is recovering. But even with all the precautions, you don't know. It's scary out there because you don't know who's carrying it without symptoms. So they said, well, our staff, we make sure they take their temperature before they come in. Well, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, I could be carrying it for all I know, you know? So the health and safety is very important. And I'm hoping that the governor does take his time, but at the same time, I'm encouraging parents to do whatever they can with their children as far as their education. And, you know, we'll take the child, once we're back in, we'll take the child where they are and try to move them forward. So I was kind of hoping that the Bureau of Special Education had some more guidance on, you know, the compensatory. I mean, are they going to get it?
Yeah, I think that IUs will hear about it before we do, but.
Okay, well then I haven't heard yet. We are meeting on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We're meeting virtually. We're, you know, our local task force on right to education will be meeting through Zoom next week. I was at a meeting at for the county. They use a different platform. I think it's like a go-to meeting type of platform regarding the MHIDD, the intellectual disabilities, and what's happening on that with those providers and everything. So it's I'm just trying to get as much information as I can so I can answer questions. But yeah. I keep telling the parents, I'll let you know as soon as I find out.
When sometimes, you know, when we were talking with Carol today, one of the things she said, there's such uncertainty that, you know, some questions just cannot be answered because of that uncertainty. And it's unfortunate because that's what people want, is looking for answers. But you know, when nobody knows what's coming next, it's tough. One of the first webinars that we did regarding, you know, the distance learning was suggesting to families that when they see that regression, where they see, you know, that the child's actually making progress at home, is to note that, write that down.
That's what I've been telling them too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not data in the way that schools take data, but it's our data from what we're seeing at home. So, you know, take that information back to your teams because that's important information to share.
Yeah. Especially if they are doing well. What's working? And how can we implement that?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's all I have. I was kind of hoping for some more answers, you know, but we have what we have right now.
Well, Wendi, for your listeners and your teams, we keep up on PDE's website. They have a COVID section, a COVID page, and maybe sometimes a couple times a week, they update that page. The most recent updates were to transportation, post-secondary, and youth in foster care. So they'll note what their newest guidance is on that FAQ that's on the
Okay, the FAQ is
Department of Ed. Yeah, it's a really helpful document to know what's going on.
Perfect, perfect. Mary Ann and Liz, there is a Survey Monkey in the chat box if you don't mind clicking in on that, because we couldn't get all of our other people in. If you don't mind going down in there and clicking on that, that is our federal data that we'll
Okay.
also share with the PEAL Center regarding Miss Cindy's talk with us today. So I think I've got a wrap on all my questions. Does anybody else have anything else that they need to ask Miss
Nope.
Cindy?
No, I'm good.
We're all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with that, I'm going to thank you for popping on. I hope to have you back in a couple of weeks with
Bet,
more
Wendy.
information. I'm sure it'll change a little bit again, and you might have something more to tell us.